Hello and welcome to DTC Podcast. I'm Eric Dyck. In today's bonus episode, we chat with Kevin Liu, CEO of Numeral. He's an e-commerce entrepreneur as well as a certified public accountant, so that makes him the rare unicorn who can make money as well as help you count it. He built Numeral with Combinator backing to solve the simple yet headache-inducing problem of multi-state e-commerce tax filing. As a CPA and an entrepreneur, Kevin's got a unique perspective on the DTC P&L, along with why all businesses need to streamline their finances in the coming years. Putting e-commerce sales tax on autopilot, spending less than 5 minutes a month on doing it is a great start. So go to numeralhq.com to schedule a demo and on with the show.
Actually do your own books on a monthly basis. You can already have a bookkeeper, but actually redoing them yourselves just to get a really clear financial picture of how well your business is actually doing. And so what I mean by redoing your books is getting into the weeds of it, right? Like going through your sort of like credit card statement to actually say like, hey, does this charge make sense, right? How is this charge actually affecting my business? So I know it's probably a task that no one is looking forward to do, but I think it's extremely important if you really want to have like a solid grasp of like how well your business is doing. What are your COGS compared to other people in this industry, right? I think those are just questions that you'll naturally start to ask yourself as you're doing your own books.
Kevin, welcome to the D2C podcast. I love to start with the why. Why did you build Numeral?
Hey, Eric. Yeah, thanks for having me. I think if we think about like why we built Numeral, I think the core reason or the basic like essential reason was that we were trying to build a sales tax solution really for ourselves. First and foremost, we were e-commerce sellers, currently are e-commerce sellers. All the existing solutions out there related to sales tax just weren't up to standard. We were having a ton of issues with them. And so I think at the core of it, we really built Numeral for ourselves as e-commerce sellers to really service a massive and very complicated need when it comes to sales tax.
We were talking about this, and you actually attended an event that I did in like September or in 2017 in Las Vegas, and that event was very much for people who'd built performance marketing e-commerce businesses, but e-commerce businesses that were really based on that performance marketing side of things. There were drop shippers there. There were people that were getting into e-commerce entrepreneurship for the first time in a lot of ways. And I imagine people who come to entrepreneurship, especially from that side, like sales tax is like the least thing they want to deal with or spend their time with as they're growing a business. Was that your experience?
Yeah, for sure. So I think right now, I guess this call is a little bit of a reunion, so to speak, right? And so I think just to take a step back, when I had attended that first conference, that was when I actually had just left my job in sort of like Big Four accounting. That was like my first foray to say, hey, I really need to understand Facebook marketing if I want to build like a sort of like a side hustle or a business, right? And so got attracted to your event just because of all these sort of like e-commerce, sort of like Facebook, sort of like ad buying knowledge that you guys had. And so I think from there, got into e-commerce, delved really deeply, built a fairly substantial brand. And I think it kind of came full circle when we started running our brand and we realized that, hey, sales tax was actually a massive issue. And I sort of brought back sort of like my accounting background to say, hey, let's solve this for ourselves first. And then decided to sort of like conceptualize it as like a bigger business moving forward.
Let's just talk about the solution, because I think anyone listening to this, if I'm we do sales tax on the D2C on the media side, but we're not selling into as many states as you would be in a general e-commerce solution. So just like walk me through the pain point of what this is actually like. Like so you start selling, you get up to at what volumes, and just walk me through the pain points of what it's like paying all these states different levels.
Yeah, for sure. So I think just even taking one step back, there was a landmark Supreme Court case that passed in 2018. It was called Wayfair versus South Dakota. And basically the idea prior to 2018 was that if you didn't have a physical presence in a state, you wouldn't have to start charging sales tax to your customers, right? So like, let's say hypothetically, I'm based in California. If I sold into, the state of Massachusetts before 2018, I didn't actually need to start collecting sales tax unless I had like a physical presence in that state, right? And so after 2018, what happened was, if you met sort of like an economic sales threshold in a state, you'd have to start charging and collecting sales tax in a state. And so what that means is you would have to go into each state's individual Department of Revenue website. You'd have to register for what's called a sales and use tax license. And then from there, potentially on a monthly or quarterly basis, you would need to send in a report to a state to say, hey, I sold X amount into this state in this time period, and you'd have to remit those sales tax dollars. So it's a very, very long and drawn out process. I think if you are a store doing at least $1 million a year in revenue, you're probably going to have to register somewhere between 10 to 15 states right off the bat. And so thinking about that issue, that means you're literally going to, let's say on the low end, 10 separate state websites, filling out everyone's unique form. And then from there, like getting a sales certificate, creating an online account, and then having sort of like the infrastructure in your backend to be able to generate a report as specified by a state 10 different times. I know that sounds super long-winded, but that is the actual process that someone has to go through when it comes to handling sales tax.
And the states don't do it in the exact same way either, right? There's different thresholds for each state. Like, it just seems like an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, that's correct. So there's a concept of nexus when it comes to sales tax that basically means do you have to start collecting or charging, sales tax in a state, right? And so I'll give you the example of Illinois. In the state of Illinois, in the past 12 months, if you sold more than 200 items into that state or 200 orders into that state, you've crossed what's called nexus in that state. That means you have to register going forward to start collecting and remitting sales tax. Remittance in this case just means you have to send in your collected sales tax dollars. So imagine doing this for 40 plus states. Technically, there are 47 states in the US that actually charge sales tax. So if you're a really big business, imagine doing this 47 times.
Okay, well then walk me through what the process is like with Numeral. Well, actually no. Let's step back. Are brand owners doing this themselves generally, especially in that growth phase? Are they the ones having to track all this stuff down? I guess financial firms, like accounting firms, are set up to do this, but maybe not specifically for the e-commerce use case. Like, what is the solution currently before Numeral for all this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, what's scary about this problem is that since it's only a couple years old, most CPAs, local CPAs, actually only know how to file in their home states, right? So if you're a CPA based in Illinois, in Chicago, you probably only know how to remit sales tax in the state of Illinois, right? And so to learn all 47 states sort of like techniques and tendencies, it's a really, really tall task. So I would say most companies out there are either attempting to do it themselves or they're using one of those existing service providers that we were very, very dissatisfied with. So one of the big competitors, or our biggest competitor today, is a company called Avalara, just extremely archaic company. It's a company that initially wasn't designed for e-commerce sales tax. They were designed to just handle sales tax in general, right? And so they'll do sales tax for the construction industry, for example, right? And so they have a very old school clunky UX system that wasn't designed for sort of like the modern e-commerce seller, right? And so for us, when we hit sort of like $1 million a year in revenue with our business, we took a look at Avalara, attempted to use them, just had a very, very clunky onboarding experience. And that was sort of like the genesis to say, hey, like we can actually provide a solution that's sort of like modern, that has sort of like a delightful UX to be able to service sales tax for, the modern day contemporary seller.
Delightful and sales tax don't generally go together. So describe the process. Like, what is it? Is it sort of set it and forget it? What does it look like when you're on Numeral and you have to remit the sales tax?
Yeah, great question. So our tagline for Numeral is actually spend fewer than 5 minutes a month on sales tax. And how that experience looks is once you've onboarded with us, you install our Shopify app, you'll be in our backend, and we will from there be able to understand or get a full scope of what your monthly sales are And then from there, at the end of every month, we actually file reports for the previous month, right? So right now is August. We will be filing July's sales tax reports. And what that means is at the beginning of every month, we'll generate a report for you. You can log on to our dashboard and you will see, hey, these were your sales into the state for this filing period. And all you have to do is click approve or disapprove or ask questions. And then it really is, it takes sort of like an experience that takes, anywhere from 60 minutes to 120 minutes to file one state. It drops it down to really just a click of a button to approve or disapprove.
Amazing. And then how does it work financially? Because you're saving time, you're also saving money with Numeral, right?
Yeah. So I would say, if you were to hire someone full time to do this job, I think that, average accountant salary, I'm not sure what it is in the United States, but you're probably realistically paying anywhere from 65K to 70K a year, right? Just to have a full-time staff, plus benefits, plus all the sort of like other costs associated with hiring on a staff. For us, we have a very, very simple and transparent pricing structure. We really only charge for two things ever. Number one, if you need to be registered in a new state, it's just a one-time $150 fee. But other than that, anytime we actually do a filing for you, it's just $75 for that filing for that state, right? And so it's sort of like pay as you go. We don't actually charge until we file for you.
I just love how streamlined the service is, right? You were talking about your competitor there that probably has like a full financial stack. This is like one aspect of it, but this directly applies to like D2C listeners here. And then you came out of Y Combinator. I was just really kind of curious about that experience. Like what was the feedback in Y Combinator about this tool specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, why Combinator? I think it's, obviously a great, one of the fabled accelerators out here in the Bay Area. I think for us, we're fairly unique in the sense that like we are e-commerce operators already. We understood this pain point. So we basically hit the ground running. We didn't need to really establish product market fit. We weren't testing for that. We knew we already had it just because we dealt with this pain point ourselves. For us, for any e-commerce seller to go out there and file, let's say even 20 reports in a month, it's such a visceral experience, such a visceral pain, right? And so for us, we knew exactly what we needed to do. And we're building out a software that at the end of the day, we're saying like, would we be happy using this? And I think from our sort of like I guess you could say mentors or group partners within YC, they understood that we had product market fit. And so it was really about how do you actually go out there and build a really, really big business? What are the common pitfalls? And so I thought that was in itself, that was an amazing experience for us.
Can you point to anything? Like I've heard a lot of companies coming out of Y Combinator, none that had, I think as you say, such like a tight product market fit already established. Just curious, what was the best thing you walked out of Y Combinator with? Like, what was the best value you got out of there?
With YC, prior to YC, I was always sort of building side hustles here and there, right? Either doing e-commerce, I ran sort of like a media buying agency for lead generation. I think the greatest thing of walking out of YC is definitely like the community and the network, just seeing other just super ambitious people going out there trying to achieve their dream. But I think the most important thing was it just really expanded my mind to think like what's possible, right? You can really build a massive business related to software, and sort of like we're I guess you could say we're instilled that confidence that we can literally build something that's lasting, that's enduring, that isn't, quote unquote, side hustle, small business.
And then what has been like? I just envisioned this pitch where like this has got to be when you do pitch this to clients, it's got to be one of the shortest pitches in the world. It's just like, you hate this, we solved it, let's go. Like what does the pitch look like when you're pitching this to brands?
Yeah, that's I would say. It's a fairly quick sales cycle. I think it probably takes 1 to 2 meetings at most. And then from there, I think what's funny about that is there are certain cases where clients will come onto us or come into a meeting and they would be extremely apologetic. They'd be saying, hey, I know I've been ignoring this problem for a really, really long time. I'm sorry I caused this mess that you guys have to handle. But it just kind of references back to like the pain point that most people deal with when it comes to handling their own sales tax. It's just such a hard thing to do, right? And so I think we're sort of viewed as sort of like the saviors coming in to sort of like take this massive problem off their plate.
And then how does it, so right now you're uploading your sales reports. Is there any Shopify integration at this point?
Yeah, so what we do is we actually have an unlisted Shopify app. And the reason we do that is because we don't want to have something out there where clients don't go through sort of like an onboarding process with us first, because there is such a high demand. I think for us, like we really want to control, like to get a full understanding, a full scope of like what a client's exact needs are. And then from there, really understanding like, hey, like, can we service them? Because at the end of the day, these companies, there's so many different sales channels. Right now, we're sort of like more focused on Shopify. But there's so many different sales channels that we would need to factor in terms of like, having a physical location. Do you have like sort of like point of sale system? Those are just things that we need to be very conscious about before we can tell a client confidently that we can service them.
I wanted to ask too, you mentioned, your competitor that has this full financial stack. What do you see as the future of the fintech product that you're building right now? Because right now you have this like great entry into the marketplace that just directly speaks to e-commerce vendors. Are there other aspects that are like super e-commerce specific that you want to build onto the stack?
Yeah, I think you nailed it entirely, right? This is a great wedge into sort of like the entire e-commerce like financial stack, right? And it's such a pressing problem that it's like a no-brainer for us to get in to help a client out. I think there are so many different ways that we can go about expanding this business. Really, I think for us, we really want to become sort of like that go-to sort of like financial hub when it comes to anything related to finance, for an e-commerce merchant. So for us, I think a logical progression is, how can we offer services such as bookkeeping potentially down the line? How can we offer potentially even tax strategy for sort of corporate income tax when it comes to our clients? But even there's so many adjacent services as well, right? So if we're dealing with compliance with sales tax, we could potentially even offer, sort of like product liability insurance down the line. So these are all things that we thought of, but we have such a big pain point right now. We definitely don't want to lose focus before we sort of like crystallize our core competencies.
And you've also got, as you mentioned, tell me a little bit about the e-commerce business that you have running as well, because you're constantly, I think you're just constantly going to be generating ideas for this because you keep your hands so firmly in the world of e-commerce selling as well. What is the e-commerce business?
Yeah, so my co-founder Sam and I, we actually started a gummy supplement brand. This was kind of during the pandemic. That's when we sort of like had this idea of saying, how do we provide like supplements, but in gummy form, right? To make it easier to consume. And so from there, there were thinking about this business, there's just so many ideas that we came up to see, how do we build software, right? I think, one of the things I was mentioning to you is, the grass is always greener concept, right? And so when we're dealing with physical goods in an e-commerce store, we always thought like, hey, how do we build something that's more digital? How do we build something that doesn't require us to wrangle a 3PL? And so for us, sales tax obviously was the most pressing issue. This is the thing that kept us most occupied consistently on a month-to-month basis. But yeah, I think that was the trigger of allowing us to think, what is the biggest problem that e-commerce merchants face today? And it was sales tax.
So coming on this podcast as part of your go-to-market strategy, what else are you doing to get this? Because again, I feel you're saying it's a short sales cycle. I think anyone who's selling at a certain scale could look at this and be like, "Oh my God, this will save me or my accounting team so much time." What are you doing to get in front of a lot of brands in the space?
Yeah, so I think realistically, like our core competency even before this was again growth marketing, right? So we were going out there. We ran all the ads for our own e-commerce business. But for us, I'm actually a huge fan of copywriting. I think for me, we haven't even really unleashed sort of like our full like arsenal of ways to attract customers. For now, it's a lot of cold email. It's doing partnerships, holding events, getting on podcasts such as this, right, that have a big reach. So those are sort of like the main primary growth drivers today.
I think it's just, given the state of the economy right now, I just feel like any ways that you can, increase the efficiency of your business, increase the profitability of your business are very hot topics. And anything in this finance space, I was saying earlier that at our event in our new event, more recent event in Las Vegas, we had Nick Saltarelli talking a lot about building your business from like a sound P&L out. And that was extremely popular with the audience. So I think everyone, when you have the market being fueled by super effective Facebook ads and the pandemic economy that we had, it's like you sort of have the luxury to maybe not focus as ruthlessly on your P&L and your contribution margin and all these like really, really specific things. But kind of going into the economy that we have now, it becomes absolutely imperative that you really have a really strong financial grip on your business. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I think that is extremely accurate, right? That statement. But for us, I think thinking about sales tax, as an e-commerce seller, I'm not trying to oversell anything here. I do understand that at the end of the day, sales tax, it's a cost center. It's a compliance issue. It's not a revenue generator for most clients, right? Or for anyone, so to speak. And so for us, I think just coming to the market with just like a really transparent pricing structure to say, hey, I know this is a massive pain point. We're just going to charge a very fixed rate to do every filing. I think most e-commerce sellers appreciate that, where it's extremely transparent to say, hey, it's only going to be $75 for a state that you need to file in. We won't charge you anything for not doing anything, right? And so, at the end of the day, this is sort of like just pay the toll and get along your way. I think most e-commerce sellers, there are way higher leverage activities than wrangling your sales tax reports on a monthly basis. They should be getting back to their real work of, how do I create better ads? Or how do I improve my product? How do I go out there and talk to customers?
Totally. But you did mention let's get to your financial hot take, because I like that. What would you say is your hot take in the finance space?
Yeah, great question. So I would say my financial hot take, and I'm not sure this is a super hot take, and this is definitely I credit one of our current investors and a fairly big figure in the sort of like the D2C space talking about, but it is to actually do your own books on a monthly basis, right? And so what I mean by that is you can already have a bookkeeper that's doing sort of like your books on a monthly basis, but actually redoing them yourselves just to get a really, really clear financial picture of how well your business is actually doing. And so what I mean by redoing your books is actually getting into the weeds of it, right? Like going through your sort of like credit card statement to actually say like, hey, does this charge make sense, right? How is this charge actually affecting my business? So I know it's probably a task that no one is looking forward to do, but I think it's extremely important if you really, really want to have like a solid grasp of like how well your business is doing. And even for the simple fact of, just understanding a general sense of like what your metrics are in your company, right? It's saying, what are your COGS compared to other people in this industry, right? I think those are just questions that you'll naturally start to understand or start to ask yourself, as you're doing your own books.
So who in our audience, we've got a lot of people in the 1 million to 5 million, and then we've got a big corporates as well, kind of listening to this podcast. Who in our audience is the prime candidate to jump on to Numeral?
Yeah, I think for right now at our stage, our target customer is someone that's doing at least $1 million a year in revenue, all the way up to sort of like that $50 million range. I think that's our sweet spot today. It's definitely a pretty wide spectrum, but those are definitely our existing clients. That's sort of like the target demographic of our existing clients today.
How I mentioned the economy earlier. I just wanted to ask, from the perspective of a brand owner, how are you feeling about the growth of your e-commerce brand in the sort of economic macro environment?
Yeah, I think just understanding that people budgets are getting tighter. I would even say Facebook ad costs are rising, media buying costs are rising. So just really going back to like your core tenets to say, hey, how do you actually go out there, build a better product, consistently iterate with customers, getting feedback from customers is extremely important. But even from there, just your core basic foundation of how do you create a compelling ad, and just getting back to the basics, I think, is really important. Again, I alluded to earlier in this conversation that I was a huge fan of copywriting, and so I think just even getting back to saying like at the basic like foundation, what motivates someone to take action, and really understanding human psychology in that sense, I think is going to serve people really well, going forward, if they have that discipline, if they have that focus.
And if they're not spending all their time filling out sales reports for states, right?
That's right.
Because you you got to keep your own hands on the P&L, but when it comes to this other stuff, get it off your desk. Numeralhq.com, and you can book a demo to actually see what the tool is like. What does a demo of this actually comprise? Like, what is a demo comprised of?
Yeah, so I think a demo today, if you were to register for one and sign up for one, you would get in contact with someone on our team, and then from there, it's really like a discovery call to really understand like what your business requires today, how big your business is, and then from there, just fleshing out. This is the expectations of what it's like to work with us. You'll take a look at our dashboard to see, how streamlined, how intuitive it is. But at the end of the day, some people have attributed it to be some sort of like therapy call as well, right? In the sense that they will feel confident leaving this call to know that sales tax is one less thing they have to worry about when it comes to the multitude of problems an e-commerce seller deals with today.
Put it on autopilot, just like your website says. I think that's smart.
That's right.
I urge everyone in our audience to go to numeralhq.com. Check this out. If you are having headaches with your e-commerce sales tax, put it on autopilot. Let's go.
That's right.
Nice. All right, Kevin, thanks for coming on today, man. This is fun.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eric. Hopefully we'll see you in person again at one of these events.
That's right.
And we could chop it up there.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you're not a subscriber to our newsletter, you can do that right now at directtoconsumer.co. I'm Eric Dyck, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.